Welcome to our webinar, and thank you all for joining today's discussion on managing your data and why knowledge management is important for virtual companies. As we all know, during the development of therapeutics, there's a complex relationship between data and risk management, where data informs risk drives the generation of new data, and then that modifies or mitigates risk. So a comprehensive knowledge management program is critical for virtual companies who interact with multiple contractors and vendors and large pharma, where there are large cross-functional teams informing different areas of the overall program. Today we have Vikas Chatterjee. He's going to start us off, the CEO of Pharmatech Associates, and he'll be starting us off with a few slides to provide some context for our conversation. And at that point, we'll move into our discussion. So now let me hand this over to Vikas.
Thank you, Adam. Yes, so the concept of knowledge management for virtual companies is a very interesting topic. When you look at sort of the activities associated with drug development, whether you are a virtual company or a vertical company, it doesn't really matter. The activities and the expectations from regulatory bodies are the same. It's just how we go about accomplishing them. There is one universal truth, though, I would say. I mean, in developing drugs, we use data to innovate, we use data to optimize, we use data to govern. I mean, data is a component of every piece of the process. And so consequently, understanding how we're going to go about utilizing that data, the framework for acquiring that data, access to that data, organizing that data is a really important component. When we talk about knowledge management, it's a term that's bandied about, but fundamentally what we're talking about is how can we harness sort of the institutional understanding of your organization, whether it's technical associated with the product and process development or the clinical development, or really these life cycle steps associated with new product development, or associated with the business practices and the internal processes associated with executing each one of these steps. Both of those are incredibly important in terms of finding ways to optimize and shrink your time to market. And organizations that have a solution or a plan in place to be able to harness the data and access the data are organizations that get to really realize the enhanced performance from past mistakes, quite honestly, or past discussions around technical challenges that they had to meet. Let's move to the next slide. So implicit in almost every drug development exercise today is the sort of the standardization of risk management tools. We call it quality risk management. Quality risk management, a lot of people reference ICH-Q9 or Q10 and how they can plug a risk management framework into their overall drug development thought process. A lot of companies make the mistake of using risk as a checkbox activity, i.e. it's something to be done and to be demonstrated, but not necessarily leveraged. And when you start thinking about knowledge management as it relates to learning from your past data, learning from your past risk evaluations, because what we're trying to do is drive risk down, right? At the end of the day, it's important to have some process that will allow you to access that analysis. And those companies that institutionalize these risk tools, and this is just a short smattering of locations where risk management tools are commonly used in the development of a product, the institutionalize the need to actually go back and access that is where you buy back velocity in moving your product forward. Next slide, please. So when you think about data management, having some sort of a strategy and a roadmap, a plan, as it were, is essential to be able to maximize the opportunity in terms of the data that you're getting. And a virtual drug company is often going to have contract service providers, either in method development or testing, or in manufacturing and packaging associated with their product moving through the different clinical life cycle steps. And I've always liked to say that a goal without a plan is just a wish. And you've got to have some sort of strategy here, which allows you to as efficiently as possible, access the data, have conversations with your subject matter experts, whether external consultants like somebody like Pharmatech, or your solution provider or your contract service provider, so that you can review data in an effective way, make sure that you're minimizing errors associated with that data review, have confidence in the integrity of that data, so that as you move through your product development, you're harnessing that power, that knowledge across the organization, and that buys you back time. It also brings you back to a point where you have a lot of confidence in your conclusions as you move through that development life cycle. So, set with that as a backdrop, I'll turn it back over to Adam.
Yeah, thank you. No, great. That's a good overview, Bikash. Thanks for doing that. Yeah, so I'd also like to now to introduce Yash Argawal. He's the CEO of Cherry Circle Software, the makers of QBD Vision, and now he's going to join Bikash and myself for our discussion. So to start off the discussion, just to get things going and to get the folks out that are attending, thinking, we can start off with a few questions just to get the discussion rolling here, and then we'll go, into discussion, questions from the audience as well. So the first question, I guess I'm going to pose this to Bikash. So what are the current challenges of data management for CMOs and Cdmos, or with Cdmos and
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great question. That hits the nail on the head, I think, Adam. The challenge a lot of virtual companies have, and the mistakes that they make, is the reliance on the CDMO for really the CMC and overall product and process development responsibility. I'm not saying that there aren't CDMOs out there that are highly capable. There are many, many, many CDMOs that are highly capable. But it's important for the drug sponsor to remember that this data that's being generated is theirs. And it's essential to have access to that as you're going through the process design and scale up exercise, as you're developing clinical materials for your overall clinical studies. And more often than not, I find folks are keeping the data at the CDMO, or the data is in different individual engineers' computers as they're moving through each step of the process under protocols that are being generated, reports that are being generated. I'm not saying the data doesn't exist, but getting your hands on that data and utilizing that data in a highly effective way is something that a lot of folks don't put any time or energy into. And the reality is, as you bring a CDMO in, if you identified a CDMO that's got the technical horsepower to complement your own internal technical staff, they have the expertise to bring your product from the early stages up through a phase 3 or pivotal lot or potentially commercial lot out there. You're going to be spending a lot of time together as you review the outputs from your different experimental studies. And having a framework which allows you to readily access past studies, current studies, and then discuss future studies in some sort of a conduit, a portal, a repository, is really a very powerful concept to try and put in place, so that we're all talking off the same data. We're all looking at that data in the most expeditious manner. And as you move from your development agreements into your quality agreements, and you start talking about how you're going to interact with the CDMO and contract service provider in terms of when that data is accessible and how that data is going to be used, is really a compelling and an important component of setting up that process with your CDMO. And oftentimes virtual drug companies or drug sponsors don't spend any time talking about the details of that. And that's a solution that I think folks need to spend more time with, because it's extraordinary how often we find ourselves moving towards an IND update, a late stage IND update, or putting together a briefing package for an end of phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3 meeting, and accessing that data, finding the supportive information is extraordinarily difficult to do. Or it sits with the CDMO, and then there's a whole process that needs to be architected because it's not been discussed up front as to how I get that data in order to be able to do what I need to do in order to move forward with my program. And so having that conversation early on with your CDMO as you look at the development and the engagement components is a really important component, I think, of any drug sponsor that's going to use an outsourcing strategy.
Okay. Yeah, and I would actually add to that sort of the point you raised in your slides, Vikash, about institutional knowledge. It is not unheard of that, relationships change and you start with one group and you may not stay with that group. And so there's a risk, right? That if you leave your information and your data with the CDMO and now the relationship changes, it's very difficult to get that data, or transfer that information to the other another organization that you may decide to work with or that you may be transferring information to. And so you're sort of, having to figure out how to put all that together. And so I think from an institutional perspective, it's not just about, obviously a key point is to make sure that you have an understanding of what's going on, but to make sure that you have access to that information as well when you need it, and should that relationship change.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The challenge, the advantage of CDMOs is you're buying bandwidth, you're buying expertise, and you're buying bandwidth in particular processes. But the other challenge with many CDMOs is that they tend to have less experienced individuals that are in support functions there. They have a lot of clients, both commercial and in development. They have to take care of their commercial clients there. And they tend to have higher turnover as people get experience. And as you said, Yash, if you have a novel technology or a novel analytical test in which there's sort of a method transfer, method scale up, and optimization exercise there, if that analyst leaves, you may not have insight into those processes anymore as to what happened with that data. And as you begin to do your I&D updates, you might find that your story is incomplete. So having some sort of centralized repository that allows you to capture all of those rich conversations is really an important piece of really ensuring that you don't lose something as you move through your overall CDMO partner engagements.
All right. No, that's great. No, thanks, Vikash. Yes. Okay. Now, second question here. So again, like some of the challenges, right? Because this discussion, kind of brings me to the next point. Is and I guess I'll pose this to Vikash to start out. So what are the current challenges, right? I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, but what are the current challenges of data management with the CDMOs, CMOs? I mean, I can think of some examples, but I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, I'll start, and please chime in. I think I started talking about them a little bit, is that there isn't enough conversation early on in terms of how data is going to be managed. So classically, one of the challenges with a CDMO, while you're buying bandwidth, you're buying expertise, you are also succumbing to queue time, and you're succumbing to processing time. So more often than not, if we're going to execute a protocol, there isn't enough conversation on whether the data can be provided to the drug sponsor, perhaps in a non-released manner. So if I'm doing drug dissolution testing or HPLC testing, it's not unusual to be able to ask for that data prior to QA doing its final evaluation. And as long as you understand the context within which that data is being provided, i.e. it's not finally signed off, you can get an awful lot of work done in that next 4 to 5 or 6 weeks as you're waiting for that final data to be reviewed. So having those conversations early in an engagement, and so that there's a comfort level and an agreement that that will be done, is important. And then understanding where you're going to store that data, how that data will be accessible, how that data will inform the next step of your process development, is something that we want to have also defined up front, so that everyone on the program, both on the drug sponsor side and the CDMO side, potentially know where that data is and how it's being referenced. It just allows us to make sure that the conversations are accurate as we move forward in our troubleshooting and in our innovation and in our problem-solving exercise. It also ensures that we have access to that information if the problem reoccurs, or if we find a new problem occurs that requires us to change our fundamental assumptions. Mm-hmm. And being able to point to that in a very accurate way and being able to retrieve that data, perhaps marry that with the risk analysis that's the underlying premise around how that protocol was designed, is really compelling in terms of effectively moving through sort of that development process with a CDMO who has a lot of things on their mind, quite honestly, other than just a drug sponsor.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of the things, I've run into working with multiple CDMOs and transferring data and transferring information is how does it get there? Who does it go to? And then how do we get it back when they've executed the protocol? And how do we keep track of all of that? Because a lot of times we have a lot of moving pieces and parts, right? We've got analytical methods that are being developed and validated. We've got, process development activities that are going on. We've got process qualification, process validation, maybe even a tech transfer kind of being thrown in on top of that. And it becomes complex and complicated, and tracking all the players and all the pieces as they move through that system in CDMO to make sure it does so efficiently can be challenging.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I think oftentimes having the conversation that if you want the raw data, not just the final report, the analytical report or the summary report, et cetera, you want the raw data so that you have confidence in terms of what was actually happening in that particular measurement exercise. That's something you need to define up front and have a place to keep that information, so you're differentiating raw data from summary data from process data.
Right. And there's the data integrity piece as well too. So it's not just the data itself, but how it's actually being, moved back and forth. Right. And so that's, I think another aspect of knowledge management and validated knowledge management architectures is that you're including the requirements of data integrity in this discussion as well, so that what data really sort of goes into what compartment and how it's been actually flagged, so you don't lose sight of that piece.
Right. And that's where the raw data can be so powerful in trying to understand what you're actually seeing, perhaps in summary data.
You have one question from the audience, I think, if we want to take that. I don't mind reading the question, Adam.
Go ahead.
Oh, so, sure. Yeah,
the question is, quality by design approaches to data management have been around for a while now. What do you still see as the barrier from a CDMO end, as well as regulatory perspective, in implementing data management through this route?
Well, yeah, so I think the concepts are not new. ICH-Q8 has been around since 2006. And the premise around process understanding and informing product performance, I think, is a sound one. It's used in a lot of industries beyond pharma, beyond that. So I think, the principles around quality by design are solid and true. I think what hasn't happened at the same rate here, and this is probably one of the few advantages, if you wanted to look at a silver lining of COVID, is that it has forced the conversations around some of these transactional elements as it relates to data management. Having that data management plan and agreement up front is where you buy back velocity. You also buy back knowledge management, so that both sides of the equation, i.e. the CDMO and the drug sponsor, are now working off the same set of data. They are now looking at the same sorts of behaviors. And then, so now when you're having a conversation on the next steps, you're really working from a common platform there. And so the conversations and the structure around how that's done historically has always been sort of improvisational and not been at the forefront of the conversation with the CDMO in terms of development agreements and quality agreements there. And bringing that to the forefront, much like IP conversations that come out of that, we've talked about that at length, that having an IP conversation early on in an engagement of the CDMO is important, because there's going to be innovation that's going to take place as you bring your product to market potentially, and how that's handled is really important, so that folks, there are no disagreements as you move forward. Having that clearly understood data management plan in place is one way you're going to be able to harness the power of the QBD approach as early as possible.
Yeah, I would also say that I think, my experience working with CDMOs is that, they think of QBD and just the industry in general thinks of quality by design a little bit too narrowly. They interpret it primarily as, a set of sort of process characterization tools, primarily to define the design space, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. And quality by design is a lot more than that. It is actually a broader holistic philosophy around how you do development. And so, and all that that philosophy is sort of fully detailed in the ICH guidelines, right? They're well described within the requirements there. And so really it's more of a philosophy about how you go about developing your product, really starting with a target product profile and then a quality target product profile. These are all just good business practices, kind of like Vikash said. These are the goals. And then, you know, what your patient requirements are, what your product requirements are, that's what you're trying to get to. And then you build a plan, a development plan around how you're going to get there. Without that sort of coherent, cohesive development plan and an understanding of what you're trying to get to ultimately, it sort of ends up being a lot of ad hoc activities that you try to pull together all at the end to make a coherent story, and that's, you know, challenging. And so, you know, one of the advantages also of sort of this new sort of paradigm of knowledge management tools coming out is that knowledge management itself isn't a new idea, but I think the tools that are coming out, the solutions that are coming out to help people essentially implement them are novel, and they are, you know, sort of leveraging the cloud-based architectures that are out there, and they are essentially giving you the templates and the workflows built within the software to essentially implement QBD just by, you know, following the approaches that are in there. So I think this is sort of that next evolution of solutions to help you do this and really implement QBD more from a holistic perspective and not just think about it as purely a process characterization activity.
I think that's a great point. And one of the challenges the industry's had for a long time has been how they deploy quality by design. So if you've ever sat through a QBD filing with the FDA, it's a challenging undertaking, but you really get a sense for the myriad of alternatives you have in every step of the process. All right. And some of that is tempered by your own organization's appetite for how rigorously you want to go after characterization, how rigorously your compliance tolerance is going to be implied or imposed upon that particular exercise there. And now you add a CDMO to that equation, you have their tolerance and understanding associated with that, sort of blurring that overall conversation. By having a tool which walks you through the steps associated with quality by design and brings up the activities associated with risk management at the appropriate times, you have the opportunity to have that conversation, even as a virtual company. All right. And that first one might be a little bit challenging because there are questions that are unanswered. But that second product in your portfolio, or that third product in your portfolio, is going to benefit from all of those conversations. That knowledge resides there. You've already institutionalized now within your framework, the software solution, how you're going to go about looking at that particular data and what you're going to do with it in order to move to the next step. And that's the big difference between companies that really get quality by design. They have connected the dots because of their formalized and structured way of moving through QBD as to how one activity informs the next activity. It's not just an activity that needs to be completed. And understanding that connection is really the key to being able to harnessing the power behind it. And that's why the data management plan and the data management solution is such an important component of what you're doing, because you're really harnessing that insight. Back in the day when I've deployed QRM and sites, you know, we just built solutions in Excel and put them in a SharePoint drive. And we institutionalized that before you can move to the next step, you need to go back and do these pivot tables and search for similar product platforms or similar process steps that had similar behaviors or problems, to make sure that we're not trying to solve a problem that we've already solved 5 times before, right? And that's where you start buying back velocity in terms of your overall development there. So having a solution like QBD Vision or something similar to that, in which you basically structured the steps to move through QBD quickly, you integrated the risk components that need to be there at a minimum. It doesn't preclude you from doing more there, and it drives the reports that are going to actually be the output of each stage. You're going to buy just muscle memory, and muscle memory helps you implement QBD at a much more rapid pace, because that first one, it forces the conversation, right? Forces the conversation with all the key stakeholders in your organization so that you have an idea of how you're going to handle it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And then two, like from my also having been in a CDMO, having a client with that understanding with that perspective is also beneficial as well, because CDMO, I mean, we had multiple clients, multiple people coming in, we had multiple projects that were going on, right? All competing priorities and prioritization. If that the QBD or the development activities could be managed in a constructive way by by our partner or client, that actually saves us time, effort, and energy in planning and implementing the activities that are required for the development of that product, right?
Yep.
So all the way around, I mean, it was helpful. It'd be beneficial to have that knowledge management piece in place.
You raised a really interesting point, Adam, that popped into my head when you just said that. There are more and more CDMOs that are positioning themselves as one-stop shops. And so there's a temptation for a virtual drug company to go to these CDMOs, which I would not say you shouldn't do. It's fine if you're going to do that. But if you haven't had the conversation of how data is going to be managed as they're doing these turnkey activities, i.e. they're going to write the protocols, they're going to analyze the data, they're going to execute the studies, they're going to do the analytical testing, all of that there, that's kind of in a black box to you, and you're just getting the output. As I said, having access to that raw data, that underlying data, the underlying actual data acquisition component of that is really a critical component, and you're having confidence in the conclusions that are being drawn from each one of those experimental steps.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah, excellent point. That's a good point. All right. So we got just to kind of change a little bit of direction here, but keep on the same topic. So the next question is for Yash, and the question is how do best practices of the ICH guidelines help with the process development and overall CMO management?
Yeah, so I think this is it's along the same themes that we've been talking about here, right? Best practices are a set of activities that are connected, right? Where one activity informs what you're going to do next, right? And why you're going to do it. And so the best practices are sort of laid out in these philosophies of quality by design, and then also enshrined in ICH. And they're giving you a path, right? So ICH talks about how pharmaceutical development should be done. ICH Q9 folds in, the risk management piece and some of the recommendations around that. And so this is the, these are the elements of best practices that are all there. The challenge has always been a lot of discussions around, the what you're supposed to do and the why, but very little discussion about the how, right? And this is the challenge that most, especially smaller virtual companies face. I mean, I know it was my own personal challenge when I was, a COO at a small, virtual pharma company. There was a lot of sort of question and confusion around how do we go about meeting these requirements in a way that's systematic and streamlined and collaborative. I mean, I dealt with a situation where we were heavily outsourcing to many different organizations, and trying to keep a common set of information that everybody could work off of was very challenging. And so the how piece now starts to become important. And when ICH Q8 says something like, you need to be able to show how the traceability between essentially your critical inputs and your critical outputs, everybody looks at that and says, well, yeah, I understand that, I get that, but how do I do that? Is that just an Excel spreadsheet? And that's kind of what people have fallen back to for many, many years. But there are opportunities with better knowledge management structures to change the way we think about meeting those requirements and implementing the requirements that are laid out in those guidelines. And so, I think what the layer of knowledge management starts to do now, it says, okay, here's what you're supposed to do in terms of best practices is laid out in the guidelines. Here's why you're supposed to do it. And now the how piece, especially when you think about, vertically integrating knowledge management, where you're folding in, all the information around the requirements and the risk management and the data and the analytics and the assets that are used for production, all as a foundation to ultimately define your best and most robust control strategies, which is what you want to demonstrate to the agencies ultimately, that you have a robust process that's under control. When you pull all of that, that's been the missing element, I think, for a long time, is sort of that data management architecture that helps, that drives the how of the what and the why that's described. And so, what that ultimately then does for you as a drug sponsors, when you're working with your CDMO, is that it helps you drive the conversation, right? You go to the CDMO and you say, this is the product we want to make, and here's our QTPP, right? Now, you on the other end look at that and go, okay, well, this is a very clear description of what the product should be and what the key requirements are and what we're trying to hit, right? This is the bullseye here. And that then creates it's a much cleaner conversation and a much more directed conversation, a focused conversation with the people that are going to be doing the work. And I think then that ultimately sets the proper expectations between both organizations, right? So you don't end up in a situation where they do something and then you say, well, that's not what we wanted. And you say, okay, well, we thought that's what you wanted, but there was no clear roadmap that anybody really understood. And so now you're in this sort of back and forth conversation. What was supposed to happen? Why didn't it happen? So, the knowledge management piece, that architecture, drives a lot of efficiencies with best practices and your relationship with the CDMO in a way that I think is sort of gets you that, helps you to accelerate your development program.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Yash. One of the things I like to tell people is a lot of virtual companies, they have a core group of brilliant innovators, scientists associated with that. But as you start moving towards later stages of your clinical program, we're now transitioning the company from an innovation company to an execution company. And these folks may or may not necessarily be wired that way, to be candid, right? They're really, really good at innovation, but not so good at structure and management in terms of how do we go about methodically putting in place the kind of supportive data we need to write our module 3 and 2 going forward. So having some sort of structured tool which actually prompts the next step in the process and then captures the key outputs that need to be made in order to move to the next step, I think is a really great way to harness the expertise you already have without imposing sort of this additional requirement of them creating a process. Fundamentally, something like a QBD Vision or some other solution like that provides you the roadmap for educating folks as they come on board and that you already have in terms of the kind of data you're going to need in order to bring your product to the development process.
I think there's one other element I'd like to feed into this as well too, and that is the idea that with the newer structures of data management, there is a lot of opportunity for automation, right? I mean, if you think about the amount of time people spend just creating a process flow map manually, right? Now, if you have a solution that can just sort of automatically generate that for you based on the underlying architecture, the information you already have, those are time savings that give the innovative scientists, more opportunity to focus on the science, right? I mean, as these processes and innovations become more complex in the cell and gene therapy space, you need more time to focus on the science to make that actually work. And you want to be spending less time in Visio or Word or Excel manually drafting reports to get it out to somebody, and so the opportunity for automation to get rid of those inefficiencies as well, to give the innovators more time to focus on the science is a real value point as well too.
And I can add to that. I think that's a brilliant point. A point that's often forgotten is that as you're moving through these early stage developments, particularly cell and gene therapy, and that's what prompted the thought, Yash, was we often get involved with either facility design or equipment design for late stage cell and gene therapy products. And the programs and processes that are brought to us are really built on early stage processes that are not really commercially viable at the commercial scale it needs to be for a variety of reasons. That whole conversation of trying to translate why what we've got now isn't going to work at the end of the journey is a complicated one. And having a tool that allows everyone to look at everything historically and then specifically point out where the challenges are and then provide solutions to them is something that is incredibly compelling by having a central repository or some other data architecture framework where people can universally look at that and see how the pieces fit together. And then the gaps become apparent, readily apparent, that we can't quite do that at a commercial scale for the following reasons: sampling, yield loss, contamination, a million other reasons associated, control capability, all of those things become readily apparent once we look at that data in sort of a holistic setting.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, no, great. Excellent points. So I got the another question we have here. And before I go on with a couple more questions that we've got that I have for the panelists, is, please submit questions if you have any additional questions, if you have any thoughts, or if this is prompting any questions, please forward them, please enter them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as well as we're going through this webinar. But this brings up an excellent point, and the previous question brings up an excellent thought, and I think it kind of feeds into this question is that, so can and how do structured data frameworks really kind of enable and facilitate tech transfer, right? And I guess this one's for Yash.
Yeah, so this is where, if you think about the tech transfer process, right? There's a lot of types of information you're trying to hand over to another group of people to try to replicate the work that you have done, right? And so, this is where, I mentioned earlier this idea of vertically integrated knowledge management. And this is something that we believe in very strongly and have really built into our solution because, we feel that, we've always felt that, in order to sort of break down the silos and to really bring people together in a way where you can have conversations and see the gaps, more readily, as Vikash was mentioning, you have to be able to see all the different pieces of information connected, right, as part of your process. And so it's not just about, my QTPP, it's not just about my process, it's not just about the CPPs or the CQAs, it's about all of that. How does that come together? The risk layers in terms of how we decide where to focus our resources, because we can't focus on everything. Understanding what are the actual tangible assets of production, right? So what are the actual bioreactors I'm going to be using? What are the actual, sterile filtration components I'm going to use? Being able to layer all that together and connect all that together over time as you, learn and build your, learn about your process and build it, is the first step, right? And once you've done that, once you've done it in a way that it's very granular, right? I think in today's world, the fundamental unit of information is the document, right? But that's got a ton of information itself. It's kind of like, we say, it's kind of like saying a sand grain is the fundamental unit of matter. There's a lot of molecules and atoms within a sand grain, right? And so our thought process has been that actually a knowledge management structure has to be a lot more, granular and more atomic. And when you do that, and then you connect these, then you actually have a multi-dimensional data set that can be probed with sort of very fine resolution. And tech transfer then is literally the copying over of that multi-dimensional data set to, another site or another scale, right? Which then can be modified at its sort of locations and then compared on a one-to-one level. But you have these sort of nodes that you can compare against. If you're trying to compare an SOP at one site with an SOP at another site, you literally kind of have to read it or somehow find some sort of diff tool that'll do a comparison between the two documents. That's sort of a very, antiquated way of thinking about it. And so when you go more granular and you have knowledge management structures that are more atomic that way, then it sort of makes tech transfer a different type of conversation, and almost tech sharing, if you will, where you have this common multidimensional data set that people can look at, and compare, do their comparisons and assessments very easily. So.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. So now we have a couple questions here. Um,
Yep, you went, can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know why I was on mute. Sorry about that. So one of the questions that we have here, and I got a couple of them here, and if we don't get to your questions as you submit them, we will answer them and we will provide answers to everybody who's in attendance for your questions. So please feel free to submit them. But one of the question here is, one of the difficulties in exchanging data between organizations is the format one company delivers it in. Then you have to convert that, converted, scrapped, and added to a database on the recipient side. And the heart of this process is the less information typically gets transmitted, the effort required, available human resources, et cetera. What's being done to improve the ease of transferring information between organizations? Hiring data entry staff is often costly and sometimes error prone. But is that?
I'm happy to, want me to take a first swing and Ash, you can chime in?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Vikash.
so I know this is a perennial problem. It's not unique to our industry at all, quite honestly. Being able to share data amongst different intermediates, sub-assemblies, contract service providers, drug sponsors, the data is always going to come in different frameworks. There are technology solutions now that are very, very robust. Things such as called ontological databases, something that used to take us, I don't know, 16 or 20 weeks to get up and structure. We can do now in 4 to 5 weeks. That's one framework. If you wanted to use something like an ontological database, it will accept data in all different formats, and you can use a really simple program like MongoDB to go get stuff. So the intelligence around databases are significantly higher. So if you had so let's say you were doing a continuous manufacturing process and we're literally generating petabytes of data as we're attempting to understand the design space in each one of the unit operations there. That would be one way to do that. You can just simply drop it into one of these database structures there. The challenge with historical databases is we call it the ETL, the extract, the transform, and the load. And that's exactly what you're alluding to. How do I get that data out, put it in a format that I could use if you want to put it into JUMP, or you want to put it into Minitab, or you want to put it into QBD Vision? Do I have to do that? Well, those problems have been sort of addressed up front. And it's also one of the reasons people do put a data architecture plan in place, a data management plan in place, so that when we are gathering data, we're gathering data in a manner that can be easily transmitted and imported into whatever solution we're going to use. So there's a couple different ways to solve that today.
Yeah, I think, I'll add in on that, as we talk with some of our customers, the pharma world still operates in Excel, right? A lot of people still have their information in Excel. So our very first integration was to import from Excel, right? And what we also allow you to actually attach the original source records, so you still have that full data integrity train, right? But that being said, I mean, to Vikash's point, cloud-based architectures now, are often built on REST API web services. These are sort of the new standards of interfacing with other cloud-based solutions, where your API can pull and push information between them in a way that's more straightforward than trying to deal with on-prem solutions and migrate information from one on-prem solution to another. So I think, and so with these sort of new interfaces, you have companies that are sort of focused on building connectors. So they have all the connectors to all the different types of things that are out there, and then you can just connect to their layer to get and transfer information around. Obviously, there's a whole other discussion around validation around that, which we won't get into here. But I think you're starting to see, as the industry really starts to embrace the cloud, which they're doing more and more, there'll be more opportunities to simplify this. I know on the FDA side, they're thinking about sort of the HL7 FHIR standard for data exchange in the future, and so that's sort of built around the JSON XML type of structures as well. So definitely some conversations going on around that, and with the intent of getting away from the whole sort of PDF based standard for information exchange.
Right. So I think, the takeaway is that the solutions are actually reasonably well thought through these days. And this is happening on a regular basis, and they're not prohibitively costly anymore. And as I said before, having that plan up front so that your CDMO understands how to interface directly with your database solution, whether it's cloud-based or whatever, is very, very manageable in terms of the tools we have today.
We have another question actually from the audience. I think this would be a good one for you too, Bikash. So it says, do you have an opinion or a specific experience where structured data frameworks present a compelling value proposition in early development? For example, phase one, long before scale up and tech transfer for commercial supply is considered.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I did a project many years ago where we were actually at the molecule selection phase of a large pharma, and we were using a structured data framework to try and filter through the what ifs. And what we found is that everyone did it a little bit differently, and everyone tested and characterized it a little bit differently. And simply by standardizing those sorts of diagnostic activities and then capturing the data in a very structured way, it became incredibly easy and much more effective in terms of the go, no go decision. Having done that, as you move forward into early pre-formulation work and early characterization work prior to, say, your animal studies and your first IND, there's a tremendous amount of information that we're going to have to connect the dots with as you move through your process. And so the solutions that are out there right now are reasonably cost effective. They're very flexible, and it provides you a conduit for storing and capturing information in sort of a defined and structured way. Even if you end up out licensing your product at the end of phase two or beginning of phase two, you've now got a package that you can reference and pull together and present in sort of a cogent manner. And so I would say for sure, it pays off in spades. One of the things my company does is we get brought in late stage to take a look at what we call NDA or BLA readiness. And inevitably, we look at everything from soup to nuts in terms of characterization of that work. And it's usually a mess with virtual companies because data resides in a variety of different places. Lab notebooks with the CDMO, some are with scientists, some are in reports. It's all over the place. And so it's extraordinarily difficult to actually to get a full picture of what the actual holes and gaps are in terms of the work that was done. And so having some sort of a priori plan on how you're going to gather and store your data and access that data and utilize that data as you go through your innovation and escalation process pays off tremendously.
Yeah, and I'd also add that I think one of the things that, so coming at it from the other perspective, we also have some customers who've adopted our solution at later stages. I think one of the things that, because there's so much structure around what the way QBD Vision is set up, it readily gives you a view into either the gaps you have of information that you don't have to actually put in the places that are available in QBD Vision, or other folks have actually found actual gaps in their business processes that they realize they need to sort of stop and remedy before they continue to move forward, right? So I think one of the things that is advantageous in starting with a solution, some sort of structured solution earlier on, is that it can help you actually get your business processes kind of ship-shaped up before you really start to accelerate forward and start to build your organization. So I think that's a real value add as well to a structured data framework being deployed earlier.
Yeah, and just the pure business consequence of being able to delay the infrastructure investment because you really have a tool that allows your current scientists and your current infrastructure to access that. You can do a lot more with less people if you have the tool that are presenting the data in sort of an organized manner.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now one other question kind of similar to along these lines. So we can kind of talk a little bit about why digital or knowledge management helps with accelerating the preparation of regulatory submissions.
Well, I can speak to that since I live that agony every day. As I mentioned to you, many of our clients are virtual biotech, virtual small drug development or drug delivery companies or combination product companies. And being able to access data in sort of an organized manner is hugely beneficial in understanding what the total picture is. A lot of virtual companies aren't big on writing reports. You know, I can't tell you how many times I get PowerPoint presentations as the output from that particular protocol execution going forward. And that might be fine for internal discussion, but at the end of the day, we need the raw data, we need the analysis, and finding that 4 years, 3 years back is sometimes very, very difficult to do. And all of that stuff is going to impede your ability to put together a strong and compelling NDA or BLA submission or MAA submission. You know, having the foundational data to support and justify your specifications is a good example of where companies often fall down, because the work was probably done across multiple protocols. And if you could access it and see it, you can pull it together and architect a very strong discussion and justification for your specifications in your submission. But the fact that you can't see everything means you're scrambling, and that takes time and energy. Potentially you're going to reduce studies or do additional studies. All of that are impediments to you hitting your milestones there. So that is one of the huge benefits of any kind of solution, where you've got a structured process that you're following for capturing data and analyzing data, because you're basically building the story as you move through the development life cycle. And it's orders of magnitude of time scale savings, having access to something that's structured that way.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. Okay, we got 1 minute left before we have.
I have a question actually for Bikash, if I could ask him. And that is, Bikash, would you comment on your thoughts around how, the consequences of ICH Q12 for virtual companies and what that means for their relationship with CDMOs?
Yeah, I think Q12 is probably one of the most controversial ICH guidances that came out for some time. I believe the EU said it was actually several of the requirements of Q12 were illegal as it relates to being applied in the real world. But the premise has to do with post-approval changes, right? So how do we make post-approval changes in a controlled way so that we understand the order of magnitude and the regulatory pathway that we need to follow in order to be able to put together a submission and implement a change. And so, the issue is whether the proposed change you want to look at is an existing condition or not. And if it's an existing condition that impacts the overall product's performance. So this is where your interface with the CDMO is going to be essential for your ability to understand how those studies that were done are going to actually support whether it does or does not have an impact on the product's performance going forward. And so that conversation, that access to that data, the raw data, the summary data, the supportive protocols, all of the elements you need to put together your package for a post-approval submission, or potentially a prior approval if it does impact the overall product's performance there, is going to be greatly dependent on your CDMO's ability to cooperate with you. And this is where having a lot of that information at your access in some sort of centralized repository is going to make that conversation incredibly easy. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely complex. And obviously, if we can avoid having to do a prior approval, we're able to move quickly with our post-approval change. That whole program product lifecycle management piece is going to become more and more and more a part of our overall business strategy. It's always been there from a programmatic perspective, but Q12 puts definition around how we handle post-approval changes. And almost everybody, whether you're a vertical or a virtual company, has a contract service provider providing some piece of that. And if they don't understand their role in your ability to make that particular post-approval change, you're going to have some hills to climb.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And yeah, I think wrapping up now, but I'd like to thank the participants and registrants for signing up and coming today and taking time to join us today. I'd like to thank the speakers, Yash Argawal and Bikash Chatterjee. We will be sending out a link to the recording of the video, and all those who registered and also respond. And we will also respond to any questions that have appeared in the chat that we weren't able to address in this hour. I think we got to all the questions, but we'll, if anybody has anything else, please feel free to follow up with any additional questions. We'll make sure we get them answered, and we'll get the answers out to everybody. But I'd like to thank everybody for the time. It was a great conversation, and really appreciate all the input and discussion.
Thank you, Bikash.
Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Adam.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, everybody have a great day.